got a riddle for you. What's bottled at the minimum legal strength, has no age statement, and sells for the same price as 5 bottles of regular whiskey? It's Johnnie Walker Blue Label. So here we are at the end of our Johnnie Walker adventure. This is Johnnie Walker Blue Label, which is the top product out of the Johnnie Walker core range. So this, where I am, sells for around £135 a bottle. So for a blended whiskey with no age statement at 40% ABV, it's really expensive. So let's get straight to it. I have actually had this whiskey in the glass for a little while with a watch glass on top, because I do find that the Blue Label, it is very closed when you first pour it, and it really benefits from having quite a few minutes in the glass to open up. So it's quite an intense nose, especially for 40%, but you really have to expect something special for this really high price tag. So on the nose there is quite a lot of peatiness, definitely more peat than I've had in any of the other Johnnie Walker core products. And it's quite a complex peat as well. I'm getting some young Lafroig sort of peat TCP notes. It's a wet medicinal peat that goes really well with a nice sweet gristiness. There's also some farmyard peat notes in there, as well as later on you get some peppery, spicy peat developing. So it really is quite complex. It's really a very nice nose. Sweet, delicious, smoky peatiness. I think you can also tell that there's some grain whiskey in there, but I would say that the grain content of this blended whiskey has to be quite low. It also noses quite old as well. I think if this whiskey had an age statement, it probably wouldn't be particularly old, but I think there's definitely some hallmarks of some very old casks have gone into the blend on this one. On the nose I'm also getting some creamy vanilla and marshmallow notes, confectionery, and one thing that's a little bit curious, I'm actually getting some notes of foam banana sweets that you used to get when you were a kid. I'm not sure how well that translates to a global audience, but hopefully you know what I mean there. And one of the things that's quite nice about that is that's something that I've noticed a few times in older bottlings of Kalila, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think there's definitely some old Kalila gone into this, and probably a few other extra old, extra special casks as well. Over time, the nose does tend to get a little brighter and a little sharper, moving on to some lemony notes, some sherbet. But there's also that hint of stale smoke that always hangs around on the nose of this one. Overall, it is a very complex nose, a very old nose, and I'm pleased to say that it's a fairly intense nose as well. So that's it then. Based on the nose, I'll give this whiskey an A grade, and that's all we need to talk about, isn't it? Don't need to do anything else. Thanks for watching. Of course, we are missing one very important thing, and that's how this tastes, how it performs on the palate. And that's really where the problems start with this Johnnie Walker Blue Label. As soon as you get over that fantastic nose and you actually get to tasting this whiskey, the arrival is very tame, it's very thin, it's watery, and there's the slightest hint of that smoke that we had on the nose, but it's really so much more subdued and it's much milder. There is a creaminess on the palate, and you can taste that this is old, or that there are old whiskies in there, but overall this really is an underpowered whiskey, possibly even more so than the Platinum Label. As for the finish, it's disappointingly short, a little bit weak. There are some rather nice sherried notes on there, old sherried notes, some raisiny notes, some nice sweetness, nuttiness, It's got a little bit of body coming through, but overall it's a short, fairly mild finish. So what mark am I going to give this whisky? This is a really hard one to give a grade, because based on the nose, I seriously would give this an A. And if it had a palate to match that nose, this would be by far the best of the Johnnie Walker range. It would be better than an A-. It's going to be a flat A. But when you get to that palate, it just doesn't keep up at all. There's such a mismatch between the nose and the palate, and that's such a shame. I'm tempted to say that the problem here with the palate and the finish is the low ABV. I'm tempted to say that at 43 or 46% things might be very different, and they might be, but the extent of the weakness, how underpowered the palate is, I suspect that it may not be the entirety of the story. Now, I almost feel bad about this, but I'm going to give this whisky a C. I do feel a little bit bad about that, and part of me feels like I'm being a little bit harsh, but when you consider the price point of this whisky, it really doesn't deserve that much sympathy. Like I mentioned before, for £135 you can get 5 bottles of Johnnie Walker Black Label, or you can get 3 to 4 bottles of pretty much any of the standard Islay whiskies. And that's really what I'd recommend people do with their money, rather than spending the money on this one. If you're after something that's a moderately similar experience, if you want something with some nice peaty notes on the nose, but with a bit more power to back it up, just get yourself some nice bottles of peated Islay, or save even more money than that and get yourself 4 bottles of the standard Smokehead. Now, you're not going to get the same age and complexity that you have on the nose with this, but you are going to get much more enjoyable, better value whisky. And if you do want something with a little bit more age, you can nearly buy 2 bottles of Kalila 18-year-old for the same price as this. So to summarise, Johnnie Walker Blue Label, absolutely fantastic nose. You can tell that some really special stuff has gone into this, but all in all, incredibly overpriced and a little bit disappointing. Unless you just pour a little bit in a glass and keep nosing it forever and then pour it back in the bottle. That's about the only way you're going to get the full value out of buying some of this. Fantastic nose. Cheers.